I spent 2 years at Binghamton University, and most weekends blurred into the usual. Cheap beer, crowded apartments, music leaking from every floor. But there was one place that felt like it belonged to me and a couple of friends. A little clearing on the far side of the campus nature preserve, tucked behind a broken stretch of shoreline where the lake curved like a cupped hand. It wasn't a secret exactly, but it wasn't popular either. You had to know where to turn off the main path, where to bushwhack between saplings and brambles without getting scratched to ribbons. The spot was invisible from the trail and far enough from the dorms that campus security rarely bothered hiking out that way. If you didn't know it was there, you'd pass within 20 feet and never notice. It was October, Friday night, a sliver of moon, the kind of cold that woke your lungs. The three of us, me, Mark, and Evan, carried a backpack of beers and a lighter, slogged around the lake, and found the clearing exactly as we'd left it. A blackened ring of stones, a couple of half-burned branches crisscrossed like old bones, and a view of the water through cattails that shook when the wind skimmed the surface. We built the fire small at first, a few dry sticks, then some thicker limbs. The flames took quickly, nibbling orange at the wood, and the smell of smoke settled into our clothes. We sat in a loose triangle and let the warmth thaw our fingers. Someone cracked the first can. We talked about nothing and everything, professors with impossible grading policies, the girl in bio who always arrived late, the coming winter that made freshmen pretend they didn't know how brutal it would be. As the night deepened, the fire snapped and hissed, and the lake made soft lapping sounds against the shore. The trees crowded close but felt friendly, like they were keeping us company. Time sped up the way it does when you're a few beers in. Jokes got funnier. Mark told a story that sent Evan into hysterics, rolling in the leaves, arms flung wide. The clearing glowed in the firelight, a tiny island of color in a world that had turned to graphite and shadow. Then, like someone had pressed mute, our laughter cut off. "Shh," Mark said, his head tilted. We listened. At first, I heard only the usual. Wind, water, the tick of expanding metal in the fire ring. Then, crunch. Dry leaves underfoot. Not a squirrel skitter or a raccoon shuffle, a deliberate, human weight. Another crunch, farther to our right. My stomach drew tight. I looked down at the scattered empties around our feet and, without a word, we tossed them into the lake one by one, where they bobbed and tapped like distant bells. Evan swept the unopened beers back into the backpack. We all stared into the dark beyond the circle of firelight, trying to make a face from the negative space between branches. "Campus cops?" Evan whispered. "If it is, they'd call out," Mark answered. "They always do." The sound came again, crunch, crunch, and moved, not closer exactly, but around us, tracing a slow arc through the trees. The hair on my arms lifted. If it was an animal, it was pacing in a way animals don't. If it was a person, they were circling. "Yo!" Mark called, unsure. "You good out there?" Silence. Only the fire answered, popping like trapped rain. We sat frozen, listening to the invisible footsteps reposition, growing faint, then a little louder from another angle. I caught myself trying to fit a face to the noise, an expression. Bored campus police, bored upperclassmen, bored what? The more I tried to make sense of it, the more wrong it felt. We were being watched by a shape of intention, not a person we could see. A branch snapped in the distance with a hard crack. The sound ricocheted through the hollow like a gunshot. I flinched. Evan cursed under his breath. "Okay, I don't like this," I said, forcing a laugh that never became one. Another crunch. Another. The sound drew closer, the way footsteps do when someone is standing just beyond where your eyes can adjust, just past the last reach of light. Something heavy landed in the middle of our fire pit with a dull, violent thud. Sparks leapt up. For a second, I didn't understand what I was seeing, even though it was right there. A thick limb, green enough to hiss when its sap hit the coals, thrown from the dark with aim. Evan was on his feet before I was. "Nope," he said, and bolted for the trail without looking back. "Evan!" Mark shouted, half rising, torn between staying and going. I stared at the branch, at the black beyond the flames, at the direction Evan had run, the forked fear of fight or flight wedging me in place. "Hey!" Mark yelled into the trees. "Knock it off!" Another branch arced out of the dark and struck Mark across the face with a wet thwack. He stumbled, hand to his cheek, and let out a strangled animal cry. I grabbed the backpack and him at the same time. "We're done," I said, and we ran. The trail was nothing more than a suggestion in the leaves, obvious in daylight, treacherous in a thin moon. The fire's glow fell behind us, and the dark swallowed the world. We ran by sound and habit, tripping, catching ourselves, pushing off trunks. My breath rasped cold, my chest burned. Mark panted beside me, cursing between breaths, his free hand pressed to his cheek. Behind us, crunch. Not constant, not sprinting, but there, following. The sound never hurried, it just never stopped. "Don't look," I said, which made us both look. Between tree trunks, something darker than the night moved, and each time I tried to make it resolve into a person, it slid back into shadow like it didn't want to be known yet. We hit the main path, a hard pack of dirt underfoot, and poured every ounce of panic into our legs. The preserve thinned ahead, the canopy opening to a slice of amber where the streetlights lived. We burst through the last of the low branches and onto the shoulder of the road that separated the woods from the dorm complexes. We stopped there, bent double, hands on knees, gasping. The road hummed with the occasional car. Our ears rang with our own blood. I glanced back, and Mark did too, because bravery is easier from a pool of light. Something stood at the tree line. It didn't come onto the road. It paced just inside the first row of trees, exactly where the darkness started. When a car approached and its headlights washed the woods, the figure melted backward, as if the light physically pushed it away. When the car passed and the darkness knit itself together again, the figure moved forward and resumed its slow, deliberate pacing. "Is that Evan?" Mark asked, even though we both knew Evan would be waving, shouting, falling into us in relief. Another car came. The figure retreated. When it had gone, the figure slid forward again, patient as a clock. "Let's go," I said, my voice papery. We crossed to the dorms, ears pricked for footsteps that never stepped onto pavement. Doors hissed open, closed behind us. We took the stairs two at a time and found Evan already in his room, flushed and wide-eyed, a smile carved into his face the way relief sometimes looks like laughter. "You guys see that?" he asked, already shoving a chair under the doorknob like that would stop anything serious. "Someone threw a branch at you?" I asked, pointing to Mark's face. "It hit me," Mark said, wincing. When he took his hand away, a welt had started up across his cheekbone, bright and angry. We stood at the window and looked out across the parking lot toward the black strip of trees. From up here, the preserve looked flat and harmless.
a cutout glued to the edge of campus. And yet, if you watched long enough, you could see it. The faintest suggestion of movement, pacing at the border. A patient back and forth that never stepped into the light. Every time a car turned in, the movement slipped deeper into the trees and waited. 10 minutes later, we were back to nervous laughter. Open beers, dumb jokes, the kind of big, relieved exhale that feels like victory. It's easy to be brave when there's drywall and fluorescence between you and the unknown. We called the thing out in the language we knew. Probably some stoned junior messing with freshmen. Maybe campus police playing games. A deer, a raccoon with a bad sense of humor. By the time our cans were empty again, the story had already started turning itself into a memory we could control.
It wasn't until morning, when the light scraped away the night's excuses, that the whole thing felt wrong in a way we couldn't laugh off. Mark's cheek was swollen and tender to the touch. The branch had been thrown, not dropped. The footsteps had circled, not wandered. Someone had followed us to the road and paced there like a dog that understands property lines. We didn't file a report. What would we say? We couldn't describe a face, a height, a shirt color. All we had were sounds in the shape of a presence. And maybe that was the most unnerving part. Whoever it was had chosen to be only sounds, only suggestions. They had kept themselves just past the border of certainty where fear grows tallest. We kept going out that fall and winter. House parties, bars that didn't care about birthdays, late-night diners with sticky tables, but we never went back to the clearing after dark. In the daytime, once or twice, we cut by out of curiosity. The fire ring was there, our stones charred, the ash spread by wind. Nothing else. No footprints worth reading, no broken branches that told a story. The place looked ordinary, but it wasn't. Not for us. The clearing had changed in some essential way. It had been ours, then it had belonged to someone else, and now it belonged to the silence between. Even years later, when October smells like smoke and wet leaves, I still think about that pacing shape at the edge of the trees, how it knew exactly where our light ended and its dark began, and how patient it was, waiting for us to step too far into it.